Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This month we're talking about Roman Britain in my journey through British history. So this month I read two books about Roman British history, and the first book I read was this one on my Kindle, Boudica Dreaming the Eagle by Amanda Scott. This is the first book of a trilogy about, obviously, Boudica. As I mentioned in the last book that I read, I didn't feel that there was a lot of focus on the culture of Iron Age Britain. And I thought this book did a really good job of trying to bring that era to life. One thing that I find so interesting is how authors of fiction are able to bring stories to life while still retaining so much historical accuracy. That is exactly what Amanda Scott did in this book. So it was so interesting to me to read the story of Boudica's rebellion and get an idea of what the picture was like before. So between the invasions, the first invasion of Julius Caesar, which failed, and then there were, I think, around 100 years before there was a successful invasion of Britain, and the changing environments in Britain and the tribal kings, and how some of them had relationships with Rome and relied on Rome for trade, and it kind of invited the invasion, and some of them were very much against the invasion, and as with the Iceni people, rebelled against Roman rule, and the impact of the Druids. And there's an island that I had never heard of off the coast of Wales, which was like the actual holy island where Druids went to learn, and the Romans tried to take down the Druids by invading that island and wiping them out. And all of this actually happened, and I learned it in this book. And then I read my next book, which was Roman Britain, A New History by Guy de la Bédoyère, who is a scholar of Roman history. This is, I have to say, a proper textbook. So it's not the most readable of books. So what I did, how I approached this book, is I read the first section on the history of Roman Britain, and then I just kind of skimmed through the rest and read the sections I was interested in. So one of the things I was really interested in was religion in Roman Britain. And part of that, I would say, is because one of the places we visited this month was a Mithraeum in London. I'll insert some footage here, and this footage includes some videos we took at the Museum of London, which has a big exhibit on Roman London, as well as the London Mithraeum, and as well as the amphitheater under Guildhall in London. So I'll insert that footage now. In our next trip, one of the highlights for me was going to a local museum and seeing a coin collection, because I had no idea how important coins are to understanding Roman times. And they had a coin collection on display which featured coins from Britain in the Iron Age, and now those coins were from rulers who I knew who they were. So there was Cunobelin's coin, and there was Caradoc or Caratakos and his coins, and I knew who those people were now, and it just made the exhibit mean so much more to me, whereas previously I would have just skipped that because I didn't care at all about coins. But now I have a new appreciation for that, so I really enjoyed that. I'll insert a tiny video clip here. Enjoy the coins. Yeah, so that brings me to our next trip in February, which was to the town of Chichester. Chichester is an interesting town. It is on the south coast of Britain, and it's probably territory of one of those tribes I mentioned that was friendly to Rome. The Romans came in, they built baths, they built villas, they built walls, and there's all that evidence in Chichester, and I'll insert some footage here. All right, so we're here in Chichester, and what do we think?
Beautiful.
The weather's great. So one of the things we learned yesterday is that the stone that was used to build these walls might have been from Fishbourne Palace after it was destroyed. So that's cool. Okay, so those were our trips in February. I definitely feel like I learned a lot about Roman Britain, and I think that it's actually really interesting. Multiple emperors died in Britain. Even though it was on the fringes of the Roman Empire, it was clearly an important piece of the Roman puzzle. And I definitely had no appreciation for that before I read either of these books, and it was really interesting. So one of the things he concludes with, and one of the themes he tries to highlight, is the amount of effort that went into making Britain a Roman province. And by the end of the Romans' presence in Britain, this is kind of what he says. Britain in 43 had none of the infrastructure of a Roman province. It was necessary to create it from scratch. The effort was vast, the resources used enormous, and the results astonishing. Britain had been dragged from a world of rural farmsteads and dirt tracks, and from a society in which very few could indulge themselves in manufactured luxuries, into a completely new way of life. And then he mentions that in more far-flung areas of Britain, so in Scotland, Northumberland, Cumbria, and parts of the southwest, there would be nothing like this again until the arrival of the railways in the 19th century. This is absolutely no exaggeration. So I think that the transformative change that the Romans had on Britain is really incredible. And then almost equally incredible is how they just disappeared. Society in Britain fragmented, creating the building blocks for a different way of life based on regional kingdoms where patronage and power derived their strength from other sources. So some of those other sources include the church. So by this point, Christianity had found a foothold in Britain, and some of those other sources include the Angles and the Saxons, which brings us to next month. So in March, we're focusing on Anglo-Saxon Britain and the Vikings, I think. So yeah, in conclusion, I again learned a ton that I had no appreciation for before. This has been fun, and I'm looking forward to learning about the Anglo-Saxon period next month, and I'll bring you a new video then. Thanks for watching. Bye. By Guy de la Bédoyère. French. Guy?